everyone. So I've been meaning to post this video for a while and life just got kind of hectic, so I never got to it, but this is my kind of travel tips. So I flew to, so if you haven't watched kind of like my travel videos for when I took the kids to Florida, so I took Adeline and Paxton to Florida. So if you're new here, Paxton, he'll be 3 actually tomorrow, so he's almost 3, and then Adeline, she will be 9 months on the 22nd. So whenever we went down to Florida, she was 7 months, and then Paxton was, you know, still almost 3, and I went solo, and it was a direct flight. And I will say, if I would have had to change flights, I don't know if I would have done it, because I mean, it is very challenging flying solo, but I'll kind of go through things that I learned and tips and tricks, I guess. So what I did was, so we purchased obviously a seat for Paxton, because I think it's when you're over 2 you need to have a seat, and then Adeline, she was a lap baby. Now I know some people watching this may cringe at that idea, because obviously it's safer to have them in a seat, but it's also expensive. So Adeline was a lap baby, and then Paxton, we paid for a seat for him. So the first thing that we did when we booked the flight was so whenever we chose our seats, I selected, so Paxton a window seat, and then me an aisle seat, and then there was like a seat between us. And the reason I did that was because, you know, other people who select, you know, most people aren't going to say, oh, I'm going to choose like a middle seat. You're going to, you know, first the end, like the aisle and the window seats fill up, and then people will start, you know, as the plane fills up, selecting like the middle seat. And so I figured, whenever I booked, the flight was pretty empty still, and I figured, you know, if I book that way, you know, there's a good chance that, you know, maybe we'll get lucky and no one will sit in the middle. And I did that for you know, the flight there and then the flight back. And then for our flight down to Florida, we lucked out and no one sat in the middle, and so we had, you know, that whole row to ourselves, which was very helpful because I was able to have, you know, more space, and I was able to utilize, you know, the floor space and, you know, the seat next to us, and we just had a lot more space. I mean, I then sat in the middle seat, so I would be next to Paxton, but it, you know, gave us just more room to spread out and for me to have a place for the diaper bag and things like that. So that is kind of my first tip, to always kind of select your seat, so that hopefully if the flight isn't completely booked, that, you know, there would be potential for space, especially because, you know, on the flight back, someone actually did sit in the middle, and no one's gonna say, yeah, let me sit in between you and your toddler. You know, no one's gonna say that. So everyone would then be accommodating and say, oh yeah, no, you take the middle and I'll sit on the end, because most people would want to sit in the end anyways, as opposed to the middle. So, you know, don't feel like if you do that you're going to be separated from your child with a stranger, you know, sitting between you guys. And then, so that's the first tip. The second tip is I brought Paxton's car seat on board, and I did that for multiple reasons. 1, safety. 2, I wanted to make sure that, because I needed to have a car seat at the destination. So my mom did have 1 extra car seat, but I wanted to make sure we got another car seat down there safe. So if you look at car seats, so if you're in any type of fender bender in the vehicle, you know, essentially they tell you to throw away your car seat and that it's no longer safe. And so when you check a car seat, even if you gate check it, I mean, I don't know if you've ever looked outside the window, but the way they manhandle the luggage is pretty crazy. And my luggage, even, you know, that I did check, I mean, it was completely dented and all kinds of crazy stuff. So they just throw it all over the place. So in my head, I'm thinking, well, if you're in a fender bender and they basically deem your car seat as useless at that point and advise you to get a new one, having someone, throw it amongst the luggage and it kind of bump around probably isn't great either. And I didn't want that happening to our car seat. And so I wanted to make sure I had my eyes on it the entire time. So the only way to do that was to take it on board. And then it also obviously ended up helping because I was able to strap Paxton in, and then he couldn't run all over the place, and he had to sit and stay seated, which during the flight he did. Even though it was a short flight, it was only an hour and a half flight. Even in that short flight, even though I had all the snacks and he was able to watch a movie, they had a little screen in front of his chair, he still said, "Mom, I want to get up and walk and explore." But because he was strapped in, it was easy for me to be like, "No, you're stuck." Where he would have not cared what I said if he wasn't strapped in, he would have just taken off. So it's helpful to kind of keep the kids in place. And then, so that's my recommendation. Take the car seat, even though it is a hassle because it's heavy. And then I took a double stroller. So I purchased the Jeep double stroller, and I'll post a review on that as well because I really like it, where they're side by side. And I did that so that I would have a place for Paxton and then a place to put the car seat. And then I had her strapped to me in a carrier, so that I had hands free, and I was able to push the stroller that had both Paxton and the car seat. And then I had my diaper bag on my back, and then I also wheeled a carry-on. So I had a lot of stuff. But it was helpful to have, to be able to wheel the car seat on the stroller. Now I will say it got a little challenging when I got to the gate, because you'll be surprised that no one's willing to help. So it was a lot of finagling, and Paxton had to pull the little suitcase behind him, and then I had to semi-carry, and then someone saw me struggling and was nice enough to help get the car seat on board. And otherwise I would have had to take multiple trips, and they would have had to hold the plane until I got situated. So it is challenging. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not easy, but it was totally worth it. And then what I also found out by doing some research before is TSA. So when you go through security, if you have anything marked as baby or toddler food, you can bring anything through. So I was able to bring bottles of water, snacks, pouches, anything, and I just put it in a big Ziploc bag, and then wrote baby food on it, and then no questions. They just kind of looked at it and let me go, which is helpful because one, water and anything like that is expensive at the airport, and then two, when you have kids, it's hard enough getting through security and then getting to the gate. You don't want to have to stop and buy other things if you don't need to. So that was helpful. And then also if you know your airport well enough, or know how it is, so if it's not a crazy busy one. So the airport I flew out of, I know that getting through security isn't a big deal. So what we did is when Ari dropped me off, we kind of hung out in front of security. That's where Ari, watched the kids while I went to the restroom, while we did the last diaper changes, and had Paxton use the restroom before we got on the plane. Oh, I will say, as I'm talking about pottying, even though Paxton is potty trained, I did put him in a diaper because I didn't want to have any accidents, and that way I didn't have to worry about that. And then we waited kind of right by security, and we saw the line wasn't long, and so essentially we waited until I had to go through, so that way I didn't have to be on the other side longer than I needed without any help. So I went through security, and then essentially by the time I got through security and to my gate, they were boarding. And if you don't fly a lot, you may not know this, but you know, if you have children, you know, they let you board first, which is very helpful because, you know, it takes a while to get settled, especially if you are bringing a car seat on board, because you want to get that installed. And I will say, we actually brought Adeline's convertible car seat, so it was like set for her. And that's another tip: make sure that the car seat is set for the child that you're going to be using it for on the plane, because then there's just less having to adjust the straps, and it's just a lot easier if you're already ready to go and you can just plop the child in, because I know it was a little hard. Because sometimes they're a little hard to loosen and adjust, so definitely have that set up. And then the other thing, I wasn't sure, you know, what kind of ID I needed. So we don't have passports or anything like that for our kids at this time. So I brought birth certificates for both, just in case. Now, I actually didn't need it for either of them, which I thought was odd, because they said that I didn't need whenever, because we actually called beforehand to see what we would need to bring for Adeline and to let them know that I was bringing a lap baby. Which I will say, they said they were glad we called, because it is something they want you to call beforehand, so you don't just show up at the airport with a lap baby, so you do want to let them know. But whenever we called, they said that we only needed identification for the lap baby, since she didn't actually have her seat. And they said, you know, ID like a birth certificate. And that Paxton, because he has his own seat, we didn't need that. But when we got to the airport, they didn't ask for anything for either of them, but I would recommend having it for both of them, for any of your children, just that way you're safe having ID with you, because you may need it. Maybe they just didn't ask for me. This may be an obvious one: bring lots of snacks and drinks. And I bought him a little toy from the dollar store and a little coloring things. I figured, you know, planes are gross and germy. If he drops it, if he loses it, I don't mind throwing it away as soon as we get off the plane. But so that way he just had something to play with. Adeline, you know, she's still breastfed, but you know, from what I've read, is it's helpful to like nurse or give a bottle or a binky, you know, with takeoff and landing, because it helps equalize the pressure. And so for Paxton, obviously he doesn't have a binky or doesn't drink from the boob anymore. So I got him like a little one of those, I don't know, they're like the little juices. So it's a little apple juice, and they're the ones that have the little figurines on them. You can buy them at the grocery store. And they have like a little nozzle spout that's kind of like a bottle. I don't know. And I bought him that because he never gets juice, and I knew he would be excited to have that, and I wouldn't have an issue getting him to drink that. So he actually really drank it, and he drank it before we even landed. But I figured that way can help, you know, equalize his pressure with the takeoff and landing. Now, as I mentioned, I wouldn't have wanted to do, you know, a layover anywhere, just because then it's a hassle, because you're gonna be the last one to get off the plane, especially if you have a car seat and all this stuff that you have to carry, just because it takes a while to get off the plane. So I was the last one getting off the plane. And if you do have a layover, you want to make sure you have enough buffer so that when you're the last one off the plane, that you then have time to get to the next plane. So that's a tip. I mean, I didn't have to do that, but definitely make sure you have plenty of time. And then it's good to kind of already have mapped out the airport. So I looked at the airport beforehand to kind of know where the bathrooms were, and to know things like where the family bathrooms were, so that I knew where I had, you know, more space and things like that. When I left Miami's airport was a little crazy, and they which I didn't know. I think there's multiple security places, but anyways, the one where I was at, it said, you know, about a 20 minutes. So I was like, okay. And me and my mom, you know, we kind of waited, the same thing that, you know, I had done here with Ari. And then, you know, as I got closer to the time, I said, okay, I'm gonna make my way through. Well, it took almost 2 hours for me to get through security, which was frustrating. And then when I got through, they already started boarding the plane, so I wasn't the first one in, so I was like in the middle at some point, you know, got in, which was just a little bit more nerve-wracking for me, because then, you know, everyone's kind of watching, and then it, you know, I don't like that. I don't like when everyone's staring at me as I'm, trying to get the kids situated. I mean, it still worked out fine. It was just a lot of stress. But if you are planning on traveling with the kids, whether solo or with someone, I mean, it's going to be hectic. And the way I view it as, it's going to be stressful, but then you can breathe. So obviously getting to the plane and on the plane is super stressful. But then once you're on the plane, you're on the plane. And at least you made it. Even if the kids are screaming, crying, whatever, you're on the plane. Now, I was lucky it was a short flight, so I didn't have to deal with any diaper changes or anything like that. I really don't know how I would have handled that. I think I would have literally changed Adeline in the seat, like on my lap. Because, I mean, I wouldn't have left Paxton alone while he would have been screaming bloody murder if I would have left him in a plane as I went to the bathroom with Adeline. So I don't know. So if anyone has done that, if you have any tips on how you handle diaper changing, please let me know, because I'm sure I'll be flying again in the future, and I'll probably not always be this lucky that, I didn't have a diaper that I needed to change on either flight. The only other thing, so I'm always cold at the airports, and then in the airplane I always freeze, so I always, pack layers, and so I had blankets for the kids and sweaters, and I had a jacket for me. But then because of me having to carry everything and like the stress, I was sweating, and then I had blankets and jackets, and then it was just extra stuff I had to carry because I didn't want to put it on. So on the way back, I had all that in my suitcase because I was like, listen, I'd rather be cold for an hour than have to carry all this if I'm sweating. So just, kind of play that accordingly too, or have space in your carry-on that you can shove that all in so that you're not carrying it if you decide that you don't need it. And then pack as lightly as you can. So before, on the way down, my diaper bag was filled to the brim. I had 10 diapers for Adeline, and even though, like I said, he's potty trained, I had extra diapers for him, extra clothes, extra everything. And my recommendation is have your diaper bag be the bigger minimum, and then, because that's what you're gonna have, with you. And then in your little, if you have a little rolly suitcase or something like I did, that you're also taking on the plane, that's where you can put the extra stuff, just so you're not carrying as much on your back. Because I don't know what I was thinking, but it got very heavy. And then, but keep that to the minimum too. The only reason I had that carry-on is because I had some electronic stuff that I just didn't feel like checking, my cameras and my computer, and the outlet is something that I needed immediately there, and the baby monitor and camera. And so those are things I didn't want to check in case something happened with the luggage or in case it got damaged. So that I had with me, and that's why I needed that extra suitcase. If there isn't anything like that you're taking with you, then obviously try to have the minimum amount of stuff that you need to carry, because it'll really save you. One other thing, so because it was the first time, it was actually right before Valentine's Day that we were, well, not right before, but it was February that we flew, February 1st. And so I bought little Valentines and got little chocolates, and I wrote, please excuse the noise, first time flyer, please excuse the noise from first time flyers. And I brought a whole bunch of them that I was gonna put, the seats in front of us, a couple, and a couple behind, and then to the side. But then everything was so chaotic and hectic with me getting on the plane and getting everything adjusted, that then by the time that I was settled and felt like I could breathe and even get to those treats, everyone was seated, and then I felt awkward handing them out because I wanted to just lay it there, even though they would have known, hey, it came from me, the only mother with the kids right here. But I just felt awkward being here's a Valentine. But that I didn't end up doing it just because, like I said, it felt a little awkward. But that is something you can always do as a nice gesture to kind of be look, my kids may be noisy, please excuse us. But yeah, I hope you guys found these tips helpful. Like I said, I only did a short flight, so I'm not a pro. I only did it once, but these are kind of little things that helped me, and I figured I would share. So if you have flown with kids more, please let me know, or just write it down in the comments. I would appreciate that. And I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.